Don't worry. I'm not selling you snake oil here. I promise. And obviously, it's tough to get behind the way things have happened so far. And even I, as you could clearly tell if you've listened to anything that I've posted over the course of the last 9-10 weeks, I expected a different approach. I really did. I was crossing my fingers for it. Even though it was still completely against everything that we knew about how this team wants to operate. All right. I held out that little bit of hope. I was like, show it to me. Okay, because there are outliers for every circumstance. This, to me, certainly felt like one of those outlier situations for this franchise. Contracts, the coaching staff, all that type of stuff. There's a lot of things kind of coming to a head all at once. So this is not snake oil, but I do think just this a little bit of optimism right now could do a lot of people a lot of good. But we're going to talk this through, okay? It might help you process things, just kind of help your overall vision be a little less blurry about this team. Walk with me. Let's go ahead and make this clear. I'm 100% on board with everybody that they've signed. Okay, only one outside free agent so far, but still, some of the internal withholdings were pretty important. I'm also almost 100% with everybody that walked, with the exception of Jonathan Hankins and Tyron Smith. The rest really were just a bunch of rotational pieces, some B and C guys. And that's fine. Those guys are very important to a roster, as we well know. Nobody that you're going to lose sleep over losing necessarily, so long as you have an actual plan to replace them. Let's also kind of clarify where I stand on Tyron Smith and that decision real quick, just in case I wasn't clear enough last week. That $20 million is the number that the agent wants you to see. That's the total value of the contract. The total value does not equal total guarantees. Beauty of an incentive-laden deal. Right? He's most likely not going to see that $20 million. But if he does, then he'll also most likely be worth it. Especially for a Hall of Famer and a second-team All-Pro from a year ago, the second overall graded left tackle, hence second-team All-Pro. Yeah, only allowed 18 pressures and 3 sacks all year last year. See, I think people are forgetting who this guy is when he can actually figure out how to stay healthy. And last year, he figured out how to stay healthy. $6.5 million fully guaranteed, basically. If he plays 68% of the snaps, which he would have this past season, then that $6.5 million turns into about $12 million. Okay, just to keep it a clean number here. I'm seeing people use that as their justification for the Cowboys not to match that number or to retain him, right? Do whatever it takes to keep him here. The thing is, even if he plays 68% of the snaps, right, which once again, he would have last year, that's still a discount for a second-team All-Pro, a future Hall of Famer. It's a discount. Even if it is $12 million. $6.5 is taking candy from a baby. But $12.5 million is still cheap. For one of the most important positions in football. A top 3 player at that position. A position all across the offensive line board that is just, it's decimated. It's an absolute epidemic of talent and depth throughout the NFL. Okay. Every team has holes in their starting 5. And so, the Tyron thing to me, it's just, it felt like an unnecessary contribution to a problem that's already going to continue to persist. Not just for you, but for everyone. Okay, now you're pigeonholing yourself into a hole on draft day. You need a center and you need a left tackle now. I mean, people are gonna spin you Brock Hoffman and TJ Bass, and while I do think the Cowboys are very confident and pleased with those guys, you can't walk into 2024 banking on them. You know what I'm saying? And then you've got the whole conversation of, do you move the All-Pro left guard to now left tackle again? You're just playing games with this dude, man. Like, you've pretty much put yourself in the spots where you've got to take. I mean, you really need 2 offensive linemen. Because like I said, you can't find them in free agency because every team is desperate for it. Every team is desperate for that depth. So there's not a bunch of dudes sitting out on the street that you can come in and have, find serviceable playing time from. Look at Chuma Edoga. It's a disaster. TJ Bass, maybe he really is that damn good of a left guard. Tyler Smith doesn't mind the move. He's actually, adamant about willing to accept the challenge, do whatever it takes, for the team. I get it. But you're still not banking on both of those 2 guys, both of which undrafted free agents, right? And even if you could, okay, I'll throw you that bone, Jerry and Steven and Will. What happens if one of those guys, that injury bug just decides to bite this year? Then what? You got $60 million on its back 19 times a game, on top of not being able to run the football once again. It's tricky. So that's where that passion and that frustration lie, because I know how difficult it is to find that production, regardless of what this fan base wants to tell you, right? Everybody is still, they're stuck on that narrative of Tyron can't play. Well, guess what? Last year, he sat out on Wednesdays. They figured out how to get him to play. And when he plays, he's worth it. You go watch that tape and you come back and you tell me letting him walk for $6.5 million is justified. In the process of that, you should also probably tell me too that I'm a deranged lunatic and maybe I should reevaluate my life. Okay, but you won't have to. He's already carrying a $6.5 million dead cap on your books in 2024 anyways. Okay, deep breath. Back on topic here. And as for Jonathan Hankins, right, I considered him a very important retainee as well. But that was mostly just because of how decimated you were at the D tackle spot and the linebacker spot and how incapable you were of stopping the run a year ago. Okay, and this has been persistent for more than just this past season. That defense is so one-dimensional. It's alarming that it got to this point. With Hankins, unlike Tyron, right? He's actually replaceable, but once again, you've just got to be willing to replace him and able to. And letting a guy like DJ Reader, cheap contract, dude, that I was banging the table for, go get that guy. On top of Jonathan Hankins, right? But he slips through the cracks for pennies. And then Big Hank does the same thing. Okay, so I'm not necessarily mad about losing the player. I'm just mad that we're willingly letting our run defense continue to get worse. We're taking steps backwards. Even amidst the addition of Eric Kendricks, there's still long ways to go. Now let's get to the good stuff, okay? Just like I teased in the thumbnail. You saw that when you clicked on this video. I know why you guys are here. There is still the slightest little bit of hope. This next point that I'm going to make right here leads me directly into it, okay? You just heard me reference Eric Kendricks, okay? So once again, you guys knew where I stood with him well before he was even released by the Chargers, right? In fact, I think it was 5 days before, to be exact, when the video was posted, but it was premeditated. Cowboys fans were happy about that move, right? As they should be, rightfully so. But I'm not sure even I have been as emphatic about the addition as I should have been. Maybe that's probably attributed to some of the trepidation or the hesitancy to really believe that they would actually go out and do it. So that could have been part of the reason why. But going back and listening to it on playback, I'm like, I probably should have been a little bit more adamant about that. And the reason why, let's get to the point here. I think people's perception of him is actually slightly skewed in regards to what has transpired over the course of the last, really 3 or 4 years since his All-Pro campaign in 2019. Right? He's not so much the household name that he was quickly becoming in Minnesota under Mike Zimmer, but we have to kind of get inside the mind of the athlete here and understand and appreciate this is a guy that was familiar with the same system for the first 7 years of his career. And then he's basically learning a brand new defense for these previous 2. And he still had really good numbers last year, but the whole point is I don't think he's actually lost much of a step, if at all. And he'll be the first one to tell you that. He's not going to be having to learn and grasp and master a brand new system anymore. In fact, that's why he's here. He's in Dallas right now because he wanted to get back to playing fast and using his instincts, not having to kind of think and process things.
Just Zim being there and me knowing the defense. I had learned 2 defenses back to back 2 years in a row, and I wanted to be in a system where I could play fast and be middle linebacker. So I feel like the Cowboys was a good fit for me. That's what made the decision so hard. I feel like the Niners program is a good one, and the organization, the staff, the opportunity to play with Fred Warner and those guys. I feel like it was a hard choice, but ultimately, I feel like me and Fred Warner played the same position, and in order for the to be better for my career and to be more comfortable playing in my style the way I wanted to play, I feel like I had to make the change.
It's going to be second nature for him again. I think you're going to see a really damn good player. So that was, your little hint of optimism right there. Okay, that's some hope for you. But let's take that little bit of hope a step further. Okay. And talk about the team building that's happening. Most of you are probably familiar with comp picks. Okay, you've at least heard the term before. Compensatory pick. Okay. Why is that important? Well, it's important because people are kind of mocking the Cowboys for the abundance of players that have just abandoned ship, gone elsewhere in free agency. Okay. They've only signed one outside free agent. Okay. So the comp pick thing is basically, in a nutshell, if players from your team who enter free agency and sign a large enough contract elsewhere, the NFL rewards you with a draft pick, usually around 4, 5, and 6. As of right now, the Cowboys have 4 players who qualified the comp pick criteria. So as of today, the contracts of Tony Pollard, Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, and Dorrance Armstrong were significant enough compensation financially for the NFL to recognize that and essentially say, okay, here you go, Cowboys, here's a gift. But it's not necessarily a gift, right? It's in a lot of ways, it's a loophole. At least for Stephen Jones, it's a loophole. So why is that significant? Well, I'm starting to paint this picture in my head of Stephen and Jerry and Will kind of building in a safety net, being less aggressive in retaining some of their own guys, letting more guys walk than they perhaps would have in previous years, building a safety net for next year in the event that, things do come crashing down. They're not able to come to a long-term agreement, an extension with Dak Prescott, and, don't have a ton of freed up money to be competitive. So they say, all right, screw it. We're going to rebuild. We're going to retool. Highly don't recommend that, by the way. But I'm just saying, hypothetical world that we're living in here. I think the Joneses are preparing for that. There's definitely a world where that is a logical way to go about it, okay? Here's the real kicker. Players who enter free agency, so their contract expires with their former team, you sign them, those comp picks cancel each other out. So had the Cowboys been aggressive on day one, let's just say they signed Eric Henry, they signed Frankie Louvu, they signed Bobby Wagner, they signed whoever. They signed 4 guys. Well, now all of a sudden, the 4 players that they lost that the NFL was compensating them for, comp pick, they gone. Bye-bye. They don't exist anymore because you just canceled it out. But here's the loophole. Players that are cut as cap casualties because the team is essentially saying like, hey, we'd rather pay you to leave than pay for you to be here because we're going to save money. Example, Michael Gallup. Okay, he was a cap casualty. So a team that signs him, they're not signing a quote-unquote free agent by the NFL standards. So he doesn't count against the comp pick formula, i.e. Eric Kendricks. Bingo. The Chargers cut him. So when the Cowboys sign him, that doesn't cancel out one of their 4 comp picks that they're currently scheduled and slated to receive. You see where this is going? The sprinkle of optimism here that I'm getting at is perhaps some more of that philosophical change is beginning to glisten. We like our guys. Didn't like them that much this year. That's some more philosophical change? Or is that just coincidence? You tell me. I'm not saying one or the other, but it's food for thought. Okay. So I hope all that makes sense. But the hope, or at least if there is any optimism left, because there is still a lot of talent on this team. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot to work with. But once some of these guys start to get cut, when teams are making more, stringent decisions as we get closer and closer to training camp, that's when we might see them actually get a little bit more aggressive. We'll kind of get a really good sense of that as these Dak Prescott contract extension talks continue to heat up. You start to hear some of those rumors, particularly, the Dallas Morning News. Hopefully y'all get that reference by now. You can read between the tea leaves a little bit. We're going to have a pretty good idea if that's in fact something to look out for. On top of that, I subscribe to the sentiment of like if your team is super active on, in the first wave of free agency, generally speaking, it means you had a pretty bad year last year. It means you kind of suck. Right? I'm with that in a lot of ways. It's more nuanced than that, right? You want to. I use the weightlifting analogy. Like there's multiple phases of team building. There's draft and develop. There's free agency. There's trade market. It's multifaceted. a good bodybuilder can't just eliminate themselves from one of the main 3 phases and step on stage and win a competition. You can't skip leg day. Right? In this case, free agency being the leg day. But I think 30,000 foot view, bird's eye view, we really just take a step back, as I've done, right? I've tried to, because I've been very critical leading up to this point. So that's why I was looking for, okay, I was trying to find a silver lining here, just for my own sanity, right? And for my own excitement. Like, I want to be excited about the draft. I want to be excited about next season. All that stuff, right? We need hope, which is kind of the whole irony of the thumbnail anyway. I think humans do better when we have hope. And I don't think that's up for debate. So I hope that I've given you a little bit of that. Last thing too, before we get out of here, we hear Stephen Jones say all the time, team building is 365 days a year. And that's actually kind of turned into a meme amongst Cowboys Nation. We kind of like, we mock him for that when it comes to free agency. But I'm willing to sit here and give them that chance to reconcile some of their lack of aggression so far in free agency. You still need a lot of help on the defensive side of the ball. You're a long ways away. And once again, the reason why this is so important is because you cannot fill the amount of holes that the Cowboys need to have filled in one draft class if you're trying to go all in this year and give everybody a shot. Quarterback's got 1 year on his deal left. Head coach got 1 year on his deal left. DC currently got 1 year on his deal left. You need veterans on the defensive side of the ball because it's a new scheme and you're going to try to have to maximize the potential of 11 guys doing something completely different. Okay. And so you want to shrink that learning curve and make that acclimation period as seamless as possible by getting veterans. They've been there, done that. Okay. Eric Kendricks was a great start. Fantastic start. And honestly, more below the surface level stuff here beyond 2024. It's the same thing, the Brandon Cooks effect from last year, the Stephon Gilmore effect from last year. You want those types of guys to lay the foundation for the men who will follow them. It's like a legacy type deal where they pass on all their, like these are pro type dudes. They facilitate growth for the younger guys that they can show them step by step. Hey, like literally, not literally, but close. Hold their hand and say, hey, this is what you got to do. This is what needs to be done. This is how it's done. As of right now, I have no idea. I haven't studied rosters yet, and coming up with a couple ideas from teams who are not really close to winning, a long ways away, right? But have a couple still impactful veteran players on more expensive contracts that they could just, post June 1 and walk away from to save some money here, there. Okay. I'll have some of those answers for you, but just pay close attention to when guys start getting cut. We might begin to see, I hope we see Cowboys start to slither their way on in there. And if you made it this far, you're a real one. You're fanatical. You might even be a little bit crazy for it, just like I am right here. You might even have a couple screws loose for the game, but I do appreciate you. Type in the comments, HOPE, HOPE, to let me know who the real ones really are. I'll talk to you guys next time.